The Mojave Desert is a canvas of forgotten projects and burned-out ambition. It's where dreams of flight crash into harsh reality. But sometimes, what crashes isn't merely metal and fire. It's reality itself. For decades, the restricted areas of the Mojave have harbored the remnants of Project Icarus, a 1974 NASA/DoD satellite designed for deep space observation. The official report was terse: orbital decay resulting in catastrophic atmospheric re-entry, a simple, final epitaph for a $4 billion failure. But the silence around Project Icarus was too perfect. Dr. Lenore Vance, a disillusioned astrophysicist turned private salvage contractor, knew the rules of classified hardware. Nothing is completely destroyed. She spent 3 years and every penny she owned tracking the debris field, guided by subtle, persistent gravitational readings that defied the official crash metrics. Her persistence led her to a secluded, cratered tract of desert. Half buried in the hot, shifting sand was the massive, angular shell of the Icarus satellite, heavily corroded and twisted, looking like a skeletal insect left to rot under the sun. The wreck was an oven, the air inside thick with dust and the acrid smell of ozone. But Lenore, with her team of 2 silent, heavily shielded technicians, navigated the fused metal wreckage, guided by the anomaly. They found it near the primary stabilization gyroscopes, the satellite's core optical unit. It was the main long-range camera, designed to record deep space phenomena. Miraculously, the housing was intact, perfectly preserved against the impact and the heat, covered only in a fine layer of black, metallic ash. The unit contained a reel of high-resolution analog film, untouched since its descent. Lenore retrieved the camera and brought it back to her mobile field lab, a climate-controlled container miles away from the intense heat of the crash site. As she developed the film in the chemical bath, her hands shook. She was looking at the last visual record of Project Icarus. The images developed with terrifying clarity. They were star maps, deep-field observations of nebulae and galaxies millions of light-years away. But the patterns were astronomically impossible. The stars were not scattered randomly in clusters. They were arranged in perfect, non-random geometric shapes, interlocking spirals, precise hyperbolic arcs, and patterns that defied the physics of stellar evolution. The satellite did not fail. It reached a point in space where the laws of physics inverted, and its camera recorded the extradimensional void beyond our universe. Lenore was gripped by an obsessive compulsion to study the film. She ran the star maps through every available supercomputer model. The results were consistent. The patterns were geometrically flawless, impossible for the chaos of natural stellar formation. They were intelligently designed. The film itself began to exhibit anomalous properties. Under magnification, the silver halide crystals in the emulsion were not randomly scattered. They were organized into the same complex, geometric patterns seen in the stars. The film was less a recording medium and more a physical blueprint of the void. Lenore noticed the first sign of physical manifestation back at the crash site. Using her telescope, she observed the sky directly above the wreckage. The stars were correct until the meridian, but there, a localized area of the sky was subtly flickering, displaying a faint, dark region where the natural, random scattering of stars was replaced by the impossible, precise geometric patterns of the Icarus film. The film was acting as a projection screen, and the energy of the crash had created a localized weak point in the fabric of the sky above the site. The cosmic patterns began to consume Lenore's psyche. She found herself subconsciously drawing the impossible spirals onto her field notes, onto the dusty windows of her lab, and onto her own skin. Her memories began to fragment, not by being erased, but by being rearranged according to the geometric logic of the star map. Her past ceased to be a narrative and became a complex, cold equation. The distortion accelerated. The phenomena began to target the desert environment around the crash site, using the desert's vast, empty energy to fuel the projection. Lenore's sensors recorded seismic activity, but not from rock movement. The desert sand directly beneath the wreckage was vibrating, and the grains were organizing themselves into fine, precise geometric ridges and troughs that mirrored the impossible star map on the film. The very ground was trying to become the sky. The original Icarus satellite wreckage, already twisted, began to warp further. Lenore watched video feeds showing the heavy metal walls of the satellite buckling and twisting inward, pulled by an unseen, gravitational force that emanated directly from the perfectly preserved camera unit. The camera was attempting to reassemble the satellite, but according to the rules of the extradimensional void it had captured. Lenore desperately searched the salvaged NASA files for any mention of the anomaly. She found the heavily redacted journal of Dr. Elias Karas, the original chief optical engineer of Project Icarus. Karas's final entries, dated 1974, were filled with religious terror. "It is not a telescope, it is a magnifying glass for the edges of reality. We saw the true logic of the universe, and that logic demands perfection. Our random, messy reality is an affront to it. The film is the key. It captured the logic, and now the logic is trying to rewrite the chaos. If the sky is fully rewritten, our reality collapses into the perfect, sterile geometry of the void." Karas had been driven mad by the realization that the stars were actually the structural framework of another reality, attempting to impose itself upon ours. He had ordered the satellite destroyed in orbit, but the destructive sequence failed, causing a crash that only served to plant the film, on Earth. Lenore knew what had to be done. The film had to be destroyed before the geometric pattern fully stabilized in the sky. Lenore and her remaining technician, a silent, increasingly vacant man named Marcus, drove back to the crash site. The heat haze was no longer a natural phenomenon. It was a dense, distorting field of energy. As they neared, they saw the unthinkable. The sky directly above the Icarus wreckage had fully inverted. It was no longer blue. It was a massive, perfect, featureless black sphere, silently absorbing all daylight and color. The effect was immediate and terrifying. The sky had become a physical, visible void. The wreckage, now sitting beneath this perfect darkness, was illuminated only by the faint, sick green glow from the camera unit, which was now vibrating violently, preparing for the final phase of the inversion. Lenore had prepared a large thermal incinerator, designed for high-temperature destruction of classified materials. She had to place the film reel inside and activate the burn sequence. As she stepped out of the vehicle, the ground beneath her feet was no longer sand. It was hard, perfectly smooth, obsidian-black rock, the geometric logic of the void stabilizing the chaotic desert terrain. Marcus, her technician, stopped. His eyes were wide and blank. He began to whisper, not his own words, but long, complex numerical strings, the cosmic coordinates recorded on the film. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a razor, tracing the geometric spirals onto his own forearm, his face calm and beatific. He was welcoming the perfection. Lenore fought past him, the gravitational pull toward the camera unit intensifying. She felt her memories, her entire chaotic human life, being violently compressed, smoothed, and purged to make room for the elegant, cold logic of the void. She reached the camera. It was humming, vibrating, and the single, exposed film reel was whipping violently, projecting the final geometric pattern onto the sand. With a final, desperate surge of human chaos, Lenore ripped the film from the camera and plunged the entire reel into the incinerator. She hit the ignition sequence. The film didn't burn. Instead, a blinding flash of pure, silent white light erupted from the incinerator. The light wasn't hot. It was cold and absolute. The light lasted only a second, followed by a shockwave of cold air that threw Lenore yards away. When her vision cleared, the incinerator was reduced to a perfectly sculpted, smooth block of dense, black metal. The film was gone, and the black sphere in the sky was gone. Lenore drove out of the Mojave, leaving Marcus and the wreckage behind. The world was intact. The sun was yellow, the sky was blue. The void was gone. But the silence was terrifying. The cosmic logic had failed to collapse our reality, but it had left a permanent scar. Lenore returned to her normal life, but she quickly realized she was no longer seeing the same sky as everyone else. The main consequence was psychological and visual. Whenever she looked up at the night sky, one specific area, directly above the crash site, remained astronomically impossible. It displayed a dense, hyper-detailed cluster of stars that formed a single, perfect, flawless geometric shape, the symbol of the void. The void had failed to rewrite the whole sky, but it had permanently infected Lenore's vision. She was forced to see the truth of the impossible structure of reality, a constant reminder of the cold, perfect logic that waits beyond the stars. She was the new film reel, constantly broadcasting the truth of the wrong sky. She knew she would never look at the night sky again without feeling the intense, gravitational pull of the one star that didn't belong. The ultimate horror of Project Icarus wasn't that the satellite crashed, but that it brought back a piece of the architecture of the dark.